I'd like to track this evolution, I guess I would call it, of the how the suicides play in this society, in this story, because there's a progression, right, of the seriousness that's taken of these suicides. And then again, one of the most interesting things about the film to me is that suicide becomes something of just, a banality. It's not even a
Yeah.
novelty anymore. It becomes pounded into just dreariness
Yeah.
of what it actually, the presence of it, the finality of it. It doesn't feel final anymore. It's just a passing phase, right? So I just want to know what you thought that this movie is trying to say with the progression of the sort of sensationalism of the suicides in this movie. What do you think about that?
Look, the movie is broad. It paints with a very broad brush. But I also feel like the idea behind it being like suicide as teen trend is like, my God, like what's next? Like all these trends are getting so out of hand. Is teen suicide going to become a trend? Who knows? And as far as I know, because I don't have the history book in front of me, thank God it did not.
Well,
Yes,
actually,
teen is a thing.
yeah. Well,
I'm not
sorry
going to
to
downplay it.
Sure, of course, but like, sorry to cut in, but if you ever heard of this psychotic movie called Suicide Club, which is also called Suicide Circle in some circles, the Shion Sono movie, which is absolutely batshit insane. It makes this movie look like Romeo and Juliet. That movie was apparently, I think it was like '03 or so, Suicide Club, maybe '05 or '06. That period of time was based on actual suicide trends in Japan. I think mostly in Tokyo. John Bewley would know more about this. But that movie was written as a very strong social commentary about this very large problem with teen suicides as a trend in the culture at the time. So it has happened, kind of strangely, ominously prophetic in that way, but it has happened. So yeah, no, go on. I just wanted to mention that.
All right, that's good. That's good you did.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, look, obviously the two deaths, or the three deaths rather, because it was just two people were killed at one time, were murders that were, covered up and played off like suicide. It's not until you get to Martha and to Heather McNamara that it's all of a sudden, instead of it being, oh, they're trying to rip off the cool kids, these are two very hurt people.
Yeah.
Who just genuinely are in a position where they feel that they're not loved, that, again, when you're about to commit suicide, you feel like the world would be a better place without you. And the way that the movie does handle it, in both cases is a very nurturing kind of way. They do, yes, it's almost like the satire drops for a second. You realize, oh, wait, these people are genuinely hurt. And now all of a sudden, because it's kind of in the air, it's almost like it's become socially acceptable to do so.
Right.
And I think about, unfortunately, with Martha, it's kind of not as, prevalent. It's a couple of shots, and that's it. We haven't lived with her other than this kind of weird silent figure, the specter, kind of moving through the movie back and forth until she steps out into the road, gets hit by a bus, and doesn't show up till the end.
Yeah.
But you really feel it with Heather McNamara. Because as she puts it, when she calls into the radio DJ at that one point, and she goes under Tweety, and she's literally like, I'm cursed. One of my best friends committed suicide, and then the last guy I slept with committed suicide. Like, oh my God, is it me? Like, I'm in this horrible, horrible place. And again, that's the one Heather that really doesn't get talked to as much because, again, that character is the ego. The ego is the most boring of the three to talk about because the ego is essentially the self. But because she is such, she is, I guess, the one genuine Heather, I think she is allowed to be given kind of that dignity of that scene in the bathroom with Veronica, with the attempted suicide that you feel during that scene. You absolutely feel during that scene.
Yes.
And it's almost like because she's kind of come to that conclusion through that, conversation with Veronica that, she's not cursed, that there is a better way out.
Yeah.
That again, it handles it with a depth that I appreciated. As somebody who,
Yeah,
has dealt with, family members committing suicide in the past,
sure.
it did handle it with a very sensitive touch that I was very appreciative of. Even if, like, yeah, sure, you did make it kind of a joke in a sense. I mean, but I get the satire behind it. You totally earned it,
Yeah, but
but you
that
earned it.
moment, that scene, it's different.
But
You're
you
right.
earned,
There's something very tonally different about that scene
yeah,
when she really acts and prevents the suicide.
and that's where the
Veronica, I mean.
movie, that's where the movie earns the fact that it uses suicide as satire.
Yes.
Is because when it's actually happening, that's when the movie kind of pulls back on the comedy. Goes, wait, 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 no, these are damaged, hurt people that
Right.
need to be reminded you are loved. The world would be worse off if you weren't in it.
Right.
And you need to kind of put your arms around somebody. And that's, I think, kind of the culmination of Veronica's arc, too. Not to make it about, look, not to make it about the main character there for a second, but the point being, it's when she fully re-engages with her empathy. That scene in the bathroom with Heather
Yeah.
McNamara.
Yeah. And not just like growing empathy, but acting
Yes.
on it. Again, this is a movie about characters that are, or the character that is the main character that is unable to really act and make a difference in the flow of how her little society works and functions because she's she's fear mongered as we all are in our own circles in some instance. And I do think that the high school thing is just so good because it's such an extreme example of those forces working on you and working against you. The pressure to not rock the boat and to not do anything. But the movie, I think the movie remains so impressively neutral
Mm.
on just exactly what actions you should take,
Mm.
because there are certain characters that take actions that or they have good intentions and it doesn't
Right.
end up well, right? And there are actions that characters take that are bad intentions and it becomes fine. But I think that it says something about just act on your convictions and try and do what's right by what you know deep inside, something
Or
kind of schmaltzy like that.
or in the case of characters like Miss Fleming, it becomes exploitative. How can I
Right.
use this to better my own agenda
Right.
in a lot of respects? And
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Speaking of kumbaya
yeah.
things, something that I found kind of interesting in the movie was, remember when JD, leading up to the end in the boiler room, says something. What does he say? The only place that different, factions of society can actually get along is in heaven.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of, embedded in his philosophy.
But that's probably like him at his lowest and probably his least accurate conceit.
Right.
Because
But
that's
the movie's clearly countering that, though.
yes.
And that's the nice kumbaya moment of the movie, is where you find out, along with Veronica, that no, that's really not true. Even if people aren't getting along and aren't agreeing, to think that is purely absurd, right? Like, there just has to be a way. Not every single person is a Heather, and
Yeah.
not every single person is a Martha Dunstock. Right? That bullied character, the fat girl, so to speak, that you were talking about, that we'll get to in a second, who's extremely important. There's a huge, swath of spectrum of different types of people that exist in this thing that is the society. And even though they're all swayed in a direction, like, for example, suicide becomes trendy, it's almost as if, I feel bad because I'm almost quoting JD by saying this, but it's supposed to be the right thing. There has to be some kind of leadership,
Yes.
right? There has to be some kind of position that's filled, even if you're just the leader of yourself. There has to be a position that's filled of influence that is not toxic.
No.
And I think, again, this movie, it's so realistic in how it deals and how it says that, because it's not saying that the answer is simple. What it is saying is that you just have to fight your ass off for it to find it, and it's going to be different for everyone, which
Yeah.
makes group thinking very, very difficult.
And it makes it easier. At least that's how high schoolers think, and I think it's how people by and large think. Where it's like, to quote the Pink Floyd song, "Waiting on someone or something to show you the way." That's how most people live their lives. Is just they're waiting for this one entity to just come along, and it's gonna make everything right. It's gonna make everything
Yes.
make sense. The problem is, you lose autonomy there. The one way to govern, is through yourself, coming from within,
Right.
and kind of bringing it outwards, as opposed to just looking from the exterior. Because as we've learned from political movements, as we've learned from history, if you give up your autonomy, that usually leads to a lot of bad things happening.
Yeah.
If you give yourself over to the group, if you're looking for this external force to just fix everything, not only are you not going to find it, but eventually that force is going to end up disappointing you.
Yeah. Like all the Heathers.
Exactly.
It's the title of the movie.
Yeah.
Heathers. It's I think that mentality is what causes all of the conflict of the movie.
Yes.
I think you could even argue that I think the reason that the person at the helm becomes the new Heather is that I think there's an implication that the movie is giving me, because the strangest thing, suicide, the worst thing, becomes sensationalized and trendy. I think it's implying to us that anything could become trendy and anything could be replicated for the wrong reasons.
Correct.
Like JD's philosophy. If JD became a Heather, everyone would be talking about blowing up buildings. And that would be the new status quo.
Or because Veronica does have a sense of autonomy about her, and like I said, JD is just essentially a walking ball of anger, would he be subsumed by it? Like I said, this is a character who's kind of hollow. He's looking for something to fill that void.
Yeah.
Would it just be a situation where if those people were there to accept him more, would that fill that void for him?
Right.
I'm not saying that it would or wouldn't, or if that's a good thing or not, but I'm saying, would that ball of anger be channeled towards something else?
Right.
Would it be, instead of blowing up buildings, it would be making everybody else's lives miserable? Because again, at the end of the day, I don't think he's an idealist in any stretch. Quite the contrary. He's just basically an agent of chaos.
Yeah.
But you give an agent of chaos power, what do? Create more chaos. But organized chaos this time.
Right. Oh, man. Yeah. Well, I wish we were all as enlightened as Adam, because I just feel like the world would be a better place. But let's move on to just the final sequence and image in this movie.
God, what's that line? I'm just sorry. I need to just say this. What's the line from Austin Powers during the Dr. Evil speech? That sort of malaise that the genius possess and the insane lament.
Right.
That's me in a nutshell.
All right, fine. Maybe I don't need it. So, yeah. And it's always like you read what's in the menu item and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, anchovies. I don't. Okay.